everyone. Thank you for logging in today to our webinar called Tips for Showcasing Your Technology. If you haven't worked with us before, the Doolittle Institute works under a Partnership Intermediary Agreement to facilitate the transfer of technology into and out of the Air Force Research Lab Munitions Directorate. My name is Ayesha Haider, and I am the Tech Transfer Program Manager here at the Doolittle Institute. The purpose of this workshop is to show businesses how to effectively showcase their novel technologies to a potential government partner or customer. I've spoken to numerous businesses who have great and very relevant technology, but sometimes they struggle with presenting the technology in a clear and compelling manner, and that prevents them from getting the attention of an inventor or a potential collaborator. Some of the tips that we're going to talk about today are generic enough that you can utilize them when pitching to other organizations besides AFRL RW, and it may even be applicable to customers that are outside the government sphere. This webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to access it through our website at a later time if you wish to go through it. That being said, if you are logged into the webinar, please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and I will address them in between slides. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Spoiler alert, tip number one is probably the most important and will be featured throughout the presentation, but I think it's important enough to merit the extra attention. The first tip is to focus on your audience and not your company. 9 out of 10 times businesses, when they're doing their pitch, are focused on describing their technology instead of focusing on how their technology benefits the intended user. As I mentioned, we'll revisit this theme later on in the presentation, but it's very important for you to remember prior to developing your pitch that your tech exists to address the customer's problems. You should have a clear understanding of what problems your customer is trying to solve or what specific capabilities they're looking for. For the Air Force Research Lab Munitions Directorate, you can review the Air Delivered Effects Broad Agency announcement to learn about what their technological priorities are. The internet is also a great source of market research, since publicly available geopolitical information can provide you a lot of context on what's important to the military at any given time. Lastly, you're welcome to reach out to the Doolittle Institute or other public-facing organizations or partnership intermediaries whose job it is to help facilitate and communicate what the government is looking for to businesses and universities. So once you kind of have an idea of what specific technological capabilities the customer is looking for or what problems they're trying to address, you can start your presentation off by focusing on how your technology solves these problems. It's very important to remember that any technical jargon that you're going to be using should probably come later and not at the beginning of the pitch, and it should be used to support your case rather than overshadowing it. And we'll get into the specifics of this particular concept later on in the webinar. Moving on to the second tip, be concise. It's very important that you respect your audience's time and don't extend the pitch beyond what has been allotted. If you make a compelling enough case, the potential customer is likely to request a follow-up meeting. So don't assume that this is a one-shot type deal, and don't try to cram all the information that you possibly can into a 30 or 60-minute meeting. That being said, it is very important for you to make a compelling case in your initial meeting, because many times first impressions do actually go a long way. And this workshop will help provide you tips on how to do that. We touched on this in the last slide, but more information does not always mean that you're presenting a better pitch. Instead of including all the information that you want to, focus just on what's important to your customer. And if they want additional information, they can always ask you for it or follow up at a later time. In most cases, it's acceptable to ask if your potential customer would like to view a presentation in the first meeting, or whether they just like to keep it informal and have just a discussion with you. You can also prepare for both scenarios by having a PowerPoint presentation ready if the customer asks, but don't automatically assume that they want to sit through one, especially if the meeting has been scheduled for a shorter time frame. If you are doing a presentation as part of your pitch, pictures and diagrams are a great way to both showcase your technology and keep your audience engaged. The last point I want to touch on is something called the goldfish theory. Marketing professionals often talk about this, the goldfish theory or myth, depending on which side of the fence you're on. But what this basically says is that the average human nowadays has an attention span of about 8 seconds, which is less than that of a goldfish. Regardless of if this is true or not, we all know that social media and some of the other technologies that we use on a day-to-day basis has attuned us to processing small amounts of information at a rapid pace. The audience that you're pitching to is no different. So it's better to start out with a short, concise pitch and perhaps save all the information or the rest of the information for a follow-up meeting or for a future call. The third tip is to showcase your technology and not describe it. So it's very important to understand the distinction between showcasing your technology and describing it. Showcasing has more to do with highlighting the benefits of your technology and showing how it solves the customer's problems, and also identifying why it's better than your competitors. This is different from describing your technology, which focuses more on the technical aspects and is likely to be beneficial for someone with a technical background or someone who's actually deploying or installing or implementing your technology. I'll refer back to the tip about knowing your audience. Chances are that whoever you're pitching to has sat through dozens, if not hundreds, of tech pitches. Many of these companies may be presenting capabilities very similar or identical to yours. So it's very, very important for you to directly address why your technology is superior. A great way of demonstrating this is by sharing data from any tests that you have conducted in the lab. A quantitative assessment of your technology's benefits, for example, saying that you can produce an item at 15% less cost than your competitors, or you can deploy a software solution using 20% less bandwidth, is a lot more compelling than just stating that you're the best in the market and your product can give the customer cost savings. So definitely quantify as much as possible. If your technology is still in the early stages and you haven't conducted any testing and evaluation, that's perfectly fine, but you might still want to mention what your plan is for testing and evaluation. Be sure to also mention any patents related to the technology that your company owns. A patent is great because it indicates to your audience that your technology is really novel, and more importantly, that only your company has access to that technology. Something else that you definitely want to include are any scenarios where your technology has actually been deployed in real life. It doesn't have to be a military scenario. In fact, the Department of Defense loves dual-use technologies as long as they can be used to address their specific needs. So definitely don't think that your technology is not relevant because it has not currently been deployed in a DoD context. Be sure to mention any other dual-use scenarios that you have identified or that the technology is currently being utilized. Tip number 4 is the actual content in your pitch or your presentation. Navigating the innovation pipeline can be confusing, and many times you're directed to several different people that all play a different role in the process. It's very important for you to have a good understanding of who you're speaking to, what their role is, and what their level of technical knowledge is. You need to tailor your content accordingly. One of the most common mistakes that I see companies make is that they have one generic marketing PDF or presentation that they use to pitch to people that have different roles or perhaps have different backgrounds. It's very important for you to understand who you're pitching to and make modifications so that the content addresses what their priorities and interests are. I also highly recommend familiarizing yourself with the technology readiness scale, and also including the TRL of the technology in your pitch. TRLs provide a standardized way for technical and non-technical personnel to understand what stage your technology is in. And I can tell you that it goes a long way for you to kind of categorize it at a specific level rather than assuming that the audience will or that they can. Lastly, please ensure that you're including any information that your customer has asked you beforehand. If you're able to, reach out to them prior to the meeting and ask them if there is any specific information that they'd like to see. This may seem like a fairly obvious point, but most companies don't actually ask the customer what they'd like to see or what specific data sets they're interested in. Rather, they just use the same data set to present to everyone. Content is very important, so we're going to have another slide on it. At the Air Force Research Lab Munitions Directorate, the lab's focus is munitions. We may have limited bandwidth to work with technology related to things like ammunition or ground vehicles or human performance or other non-munitions related fields. And the same applies to other DoD agencies and directorate. They each have a different focus, and that's really where their energy is directed. Make sure that your content is tailored to the specific needs of the agency you're working with. For AFRL RW, if you have a really great UAV software and you're meeting with the Munitions Directorate, it will be more beneficial for you to focus on how that UAV software can be applied to munitions rather than focusing on how well it works on a UAV or a drone. Again, I mentioned the Air Delivered Effects Broad Agency Announcement. This is a great document to provide you with guidelines on what technology AFRL RW is interested in. If you're interested in pitching non-munitions related technologies or something that can't be used in a munitions context, then perhaps you can pursue other agencies, other directorates, or a program like the SBI RSTTR, which does offer open topic submissions for novel ideas. So again, the point of this is you want to know who you're pitching to, make sure that what you're pitching is a good fit and addresses their needs. And if not, then there are other avenues that you can pursue, such as SBIR STTRs. That being said, we really encourage you to think outside the box. There are numerous dual-use technologies that can be utilized in munitions that are currently not being utilized in munitions. And so we rely on you to share your ideas, and who knows, yours might be the next disruptive tech in munitions technologies. The last tip that I have for you today is, what is your ask? At the very end of a pitch or a meeting, both you and the government participant should be absolutely clear on what next steps are. In your case, as the company, it's important for you to articulate clearly what your ask is of the government. Are you open to unfunded opportunities, such as cooperative research and development agreements, or are you only interested in funded opportunities? Do you want to collaborate with AFRL RW on further testing and developing your technology? Or will you conduct testing on your own and then check back in a few weeks and share test data with us? If you're a newer company, are you looking for seed capital, or do you already have the funds to fuel further R&D? And also, it's very important to narrow down what specific capability you are wanting to collaborate on. Having a clear idea of how to proceed helps maintain momentum in the discussion and ensures that both parties are in agreement regarding what future collaboration looks like. If you're not sure what your ask is, don't hesitate to reach out to the Doolittle Institute or another innovation institute for guidance. It's what we're here for. And also, don't be afraid at the end of the meeting to ask the government partner what the way forward is or what next steps look like. So that concludes the presentation. I've shared with you 5 quick tips for how to showcase your novel technology to a government customer. If you have questions or would like a follow-up discussion, you're welcome to reach out to me at the email listed on the screen. And at this time, we'll spend a few minutes to answer any questions that anybody has. All right. In the absence of any questions, we will end the webinar. Thank you very much for watching, and please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions or would like a follow-on discussion. Thank you.